so miraculous, it is almost unbelievable. There is a way out of this valley. There is an escape from doom. If the reality is that nuclear weapons are dangerous weapons that have virtually no military value, then we know they can be eliminated. We know because other weapons, weapons that are also dangerous and virtually useless, have already been banned. In fact, we've done it twice. We have successfully banned both chemical and biological weapons. Biological Weapons Convention took just 2 years to negotiate. It's worldwide. It's worked for 50 years with no violations. It is a treaty that works. The Chemical Weapons Convention took longer to negotiate, but it's been enforced for 27 years. It's worldwide, and although there have been a handful of violations, it has also worked. How did they do it? Those treaties work because chemical and biological weapons are A, very dangerous, and B, virtually useless militarily. And technology, any type of technology, including weapons that is dangerous and useless, gets abandoned. No one would keep a stove that was both dangerous and virtually useless. Same goes for weapons. If we keep using nuclear weapons for deterrence, we'll eventually end up in a catastrophic war. They are therefore dangerous. And you can't use nuclear weapons on the battlefield or for fighting long-range wars, so they are virtually useless militarily. So that's all we need. So what's stopping us from banning nuclear weapons? As a practical matter, nothing stands in our way except the myth that they give us godlike power. Dispel that myth. Build a consensus that nuclear weapons are dangerous and virtually useless. And we can do to nuclear weapons what we did to chemical and biological weapons. Create a treaty that the entire world signs on to, and then every country simultaneously eliminates those weapons. Nothing is holding us back but a myth. The reality is entirely on our side. So the fact is, you have agency. You can reduce the danger of nuclear war. The outcome is not certain, but it is certain that you can change the odds. What you do matters. We know now that this is a task we have already done twice before. If we push, if we are determined, we can do it again. You know that much of the hype around nuclear weapons is no more than a kind of mythology. The awe and mystery that are wrapped around nuclear weapons, the exaggeration of their importance, is no more than a dark fever dream, a fantasy of godlike power. But nuclear weapons do not give us the power of gods, because there is no God but God. So what do? First, have faith. In order to be able to face the difficult task of seeing the world as it is, in order to be unflinchingly realistic, we have to be sustained by faith. Faith is strength. Come together in groups and imagine a future. Know that a future without nuclear weapons is possible. Second, speak. Break the taboo on talking about nuclear weapons and tell our political leaders that while the danger posed by nuclear weapons is very real, the importance they supposedly have is no more than a myth. Start where you are and then build up and out. Proclaim the truth in your church, in your town, in your university, and then build upwards and outwards to cities, regions, states, and ultimately our entire country and the entire world. Knowledge is power, but with power comes obligation. Together, we have the power to dispel doom. You can protect all the children now playing and growing and hoping for the future. Together, we can bring light back into the world. And we know we can dispel this dangerous myth because there is no God but God.
Thank you, Ward. So let us turn our grief into action. Our best hope might be the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, and Joanne will tell us about that. You're muted, Joanne.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to share with you an understanding of what this treaty is about. So I want to thank Ward for his remarks. What is it and why is it so important? So let me go share that with you. Let's see. I'm trying to find out how I can progress. Here we go. Well, we wondered, how can we ever get a handle on this? You know, the history that we were told with Oppenheimer and the testing and then the use of the weapons did produce reactions from the beginning of people who are going to oppose nuclear weapons. But it actually took a near encounter between the United States and the Soviet Union, better known as the Cuban Missile Crisis, to actually get the presidents at that time, both of Russia and of the United States, to sit down and talk to each other and resolve the dilemma of a near catastrophic encounter of a nuclear war. And that event literally led to the first treaty to be able to put a hold on, stop the ideas of people using nuclear weapons. And that was called the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And here's a signature taken at the United Nations where they are going to begin to sign up for a treaty. Now, treaties are contracts. And so people will actually sign up for the treaty. And they now has 191 members. Well, the most interesting part of that is that in 2010, there was every 5 years since the NPT got started, every 5 years there was a meeting to decide, well, what's happening with nuclear weapons now? Because there was some escalation. There were some new countries that were beginning to develop weapons from the 5 countries that existed back in 1968 when the treaty was first drafted. In 2010, that meeting brought a reaction from a group of nations that read what we call Article 6. Article 6 is, okay, this means that the countries that have the weapons can keep them, but none of the others should even think about nuclear weapons. Let's not proliferate them. And instead, all those countries that have them should work to disarm and get rid of them. Well, by 2010, this is almost 70 years after that treaty, these 40 countries said, wait a second, you countries have nuclear weapons. If you use them, you're going to demolish us. And that was not what we wanted. So what happened is this was seen as an opportunity by a group of people who said, well, if we've got 40 nations that are balking at the 5 nations, or that at that time, 7 nations that had them, maybe there's some hope. So meetings began at the United Nations auspices, and they brought in speakers like Peter Maurer, the Pope, and the Secretary General. Now, Peter Maurer was with the Red Cross, and the Japanese Red Cross will tell you, and so would the International Committee of the Red Cross, that this, first of all, the Japanese Red Cross was disseminated. They were in no condition to be able to help in a condition. And when they had a Red Cross person go in there, they said it was totally unable to do that. And so these were eloquent voices that were bringing out the truth. A woman came to head up an international commission to eliminate nuclear weapons, and a treaty was actually drafted because they were the organizers. By 2017, her organization, called the International Campaign Against Nuclear Weapons, won the Nobel Prize. And here the treaty which was actually written by the ambassador from Costa Rica. There's a lot of female influence that's going on, folks, here. This was a signing of the treaty. The first nation that signed it was the Pope from the Vatican City. The other nations, Guyana and Thailand, also were in the top 3. Now that has continued in time. And let's tell you just first what the provisions of the treaty are. Ambassador Gomez knew that the treaty of chemical weapons was really amazing in how effective it was becoming. And so she looked very, very carefully. So what did the treaty say? Well, they used every single possible verb they could when it came to chemical weapons. Well, that's not a bad idea. You know, they made chemical weapons, they made nuclear weapons. Let's do the same thing. So she essentially had a whole plethora of verbs of what you couldn't do to have nuclear weapons. And you can see some of them here. What did that lead to? Well, it first led to 50 countries, which you would needed to actually bring the treaty into force. But by now, there are 73 countries that have ratified the treaty. We celebrate the anniversary of that 50th country on January 21st, 2020, January 22nd, 2021, but now we have 73 countries. Now, the step before the ratification is signing. And so we have 94 countries, or almost half the world has signed on to this treaty. If this isn't exciting news, then what is? Because the UN is working with those countries to say, okay, now we recognize that we have countries here who are doing all kinds of things and are violating some of those verbs in that treaty. So each country has to analyze what actions are they taking. This has happened now in 3 meetings. This was the 3rd meeting, which I had a chance to attend last November. And this was the president of Kazakhstan. And Kazakhstan was, remembered, the first country that demanded that the Soviet Union missiles be removed from the country because they really set the pace for a country that had nuclear weapons that said, I didn't want them anymore. So these are absolutely marvelous events where all the ambassadors coming from the countries that don't want the weapons because they have signed the treaty show up. So and they had, at this meeting, they had 1,000 non-governmental representatives. So the voices of the non-community, the non-nuclear states, and all the affected groups, the victim groups, the current victim groups, where we were hearing the voices of the children, these are the affected groups, where they're telling their story of all the fourth generation effects go on from this. So this is a very, very exciting. We hope that you will recognize this and bring the message and the demand to your legislators to make sure that they sign on and ratify the treaty. We hope that the initiative would ideally come from the United States, but it could come from any one of the nuclear countries.
Thank you, Joanne. And your congregation can help us with PPF with an overture that we are proposing to bring to the next General Assembly, and Ward will tell us about that.
The Presbyterian Peace Fellowship has produced an overture on nuclear weapons that builds on the last Presbyterian overture about nuclear weapons, which was in 2018. This new overture is designed to take that base of support from 2018 and broaden it by insisting on facing the facts and making pragmatic as well as moral arguments for disarmament in the same way I just did now. It doesn't call for the church to spend very much money. It only recommends that a little money be provided to create and distribute study materials. It calls on all the churches, all the Presbyterian churches, to take a year and think about the realistic utility of nuclear weapons and the actual danger from deterrence. This is a critical moment for nuclear disarmament, and there are wars and confrontations around the world, and the anti-nuclear movement, it feels like, needs a push in the United States. So I think that it falls to the Presbyterian Church to lead the way in dispelling this myth about godlike power. Luckily, that's a task we're especially well suited to do. The more churches and presbyteries that support this, the more likely it is that this overture will pass the General Assembly. And if you know any other churches around the country that might support this, please let us know so we can give them the materials. You can contact me at ward@realistrevolt.org. I've put it in the chat. Please support this in your church. The overture, ask your session to endorse it and then send it up to your presbytery. The deadline for the presbyteries is next March, so there's not very much time to lose. We have a packet of materials with the text of the overture, a rationale explaining why it's so important, and some other useful information. And I think that's all on the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship website. So thank you, and please support the overture.
Thank you. Before we go, I want to invite all of you to consider joining PPF's Peace Church Working Group, the group that brought you tonight's program. We meet by Zoom every 6 weeks, and our hope is to engage congregations in efforts to support conscientious objectors, promote nonviolent response to all forms of human conflict, and to demilitarize foreign policy. You can see the chat for my email address, or you can check the PPF website, and everyone is welcome and needed in this work. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm going to close us with prayer. And before you sign off, I'd like to invite you to add your own word of benediction, blessing, or hope for peace to the chat. Good night and thank you. The beginning and the end are in your hands, O Creator of the universe, and in our hands you have placed the fate of this planet. We who are tested by having both creative and destructive power in our free will turn to you in sober fear and in intoxicating hope. We ask for your guidance and to share in your imagination in our deliberations about the use of nuclear force. Help us to lift the fog of atomic darkness that hovers so pervasively over our earth, your earth, so that soon all eyes may see life magnified by your pure light. Bless all of us who wait today for your presence and who dedicate ourselves to achieve your intended peace and rightful equilibrium on earth. In the name of all that is holy and all that is hoped. Amen.
This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands afar and mine. This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. But other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as true and high as mine. My country's skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on clover leaves. skies are everywhere as blue as mine. So hear my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for their land and for mine. This is my prayer, O Lord of all the kingdoms. Thy kingdom come, on earth thy will be done. Let Christ be lifted up till all shall serve him, and hearts united learn to live as one. So hear my prayer, O God of all the nations, my